Hello, everyone. This is Marita, one who catches lightning, with the Path of Ish podcast, Walking with Our Shadow, where we share ancient indigenous teachings of remembrance, all so we can walk and learn how to walk a path of radical self-love. Hello, everyone. This is Marita, the one who catches lightning, with the Path of Ish, and we're here again in the circle having conversation. We're talking story. And today we get to invite into this circle someone who I have been able to call teacher and friend. And it's rare that you get to find people out there in the world that are walking in a way that you get to balance so many opportunities of creating deep relationship. Whether it's backpacking in California, long discussions over, beautifully made food, vegan food, or saving elk. I'd love to welcome into this circle Diana. Hello, Diana.
Hi, Marita. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so excited that you're here. And let's just start with the beginning question, because I know we have a lot of catching up to do. But I want, in your own words, to tell us today, whatever comes to your heart, what is your creation story?
Wow. Well, I've had zero time to plan this answer, so I am really going off my heart here. And I'm sitting in my home in Michigan, which is where I was born. This is where I grew up. My parents divorced when I was about 6 months old, and I've always attributed my strength to my mother because she had the amazing wisdom and bravery to, with two kids, I'm the youngest of three, so with two kids and one on the way, to say, I'm going to do this on my own, and it was for the better for everybody. So I think I inherited some of my mother's bravery and her ability to know right from wrong and to choose the right path forward, even if it's hard and a little bit scary, even if you don't know if you'll land on your feet. So I'll attribute my creation to just the environment I grew up in and, yeah, the bravery of my mom.
Well, you are certainly brave, Diana. And let's talk about this journey of bravery that you've had. And you've had a lot of huge life, opportunities. And so let's talk about first your move out to California. What took you to California? What was that heartbeat that you had to follow?
Yeah, well, I'll start before that if that's okay,
Please.
yeah, which is my first move away from home, which was to Chicago, Chicago, Illinois, for graduate school. And I had at that point grown up in Michigan with a huge desire to leave Michigan because I always felt very different. I was not exposed to a lot of different things here in Michigan, and I felt very limited as far as what I was exposed to. And I always knew there was something out there for me. I just didn't know what. So graduate school was a way for me to travel and leave my home. And ironically, at that time, I was also just a little bit brave, not fully brave yet. And so I didn't want to go too far from Michigan. So I chose Chicago because it's just a 5-hour drive back home. And when I went to Chicago is when I really sort of came into my first wave of, oh, I'm an environmentalist. And I learned that in school because I originally wanted to go to school to become a business major. And I wanted to be the queen of a marketing agency. And I think which is so funny to me. But I think where that came from was that I wanted people to listen to me. I had a lot of different perspectives and I never felt listened to. So I thought business and marketing was my way there. And when I went to my business courses, in economic courses, there was this linear model of natural resources produce goods and services that you buy and sell based on demand. And that linear model made zero sense to me. And I got curious about what the natural resources were. So I studied environment and I became an academic environmentalist, meaning I had never been immersed in nature, but I there was something about it and studying it that made me really passionate, and a lot of things clicked in my mind that the earth is this beautiful entity and she's not to be abused, she's not to be used for our personal gain, that we're actually part of the earth. So I got that on an intellectual level, and then when I moved to California, is when I went camping for the first time. And when I went camping for the first time, I felt in my body what I knew in my head, which is that uh, nature is absolutely amazing, and it just it went from my head. So that's how I'll answer that question.
You know, that journey from the head to the heart to the embodiment of who you are is one that many people don't have the courage to go on, nor do they even know where to begin. Now, you're also a yoga teacher. So, how does embodiment coming from teaching how to be in your body help with you with that kind of journey that you've been on, and you've changed also how you teach yoga a lot. So I'd love to just kind of delve into that because I've seen that you become even more embodied in that practice. And body as land and land as body.
Yeah, thank you for that beautiful question. I grew up in an environment, and I think so many people do, where we're not taught to be in our bodies. We're taught to think critically and be in our heads about a lot of stuff. And I think that's great. And there's so much value to academics and intellectualizing things. I love getting into philosophical conversations. I love learning. But for me, it was almost a way to escape my present experience in my body. And the first time, so I when I first went off to college, I had no coping skills for how to deal with life changes and life stress. So I did what I was good at, which was I kept achieving things and learning things and becoming, going into research projects and studying things. And I got sicker and sicker. My physical body got sicker and sicker. So my sister heard that yoga helps with stress, and she took me to my first yoga class. And it was literally the first time that I was in my body. Up until that point, I don't think I even considered that I had a body. I didn't play sports or anything like that. So I had this aha moment of like, wow, I know a lot about stuff, but I don't know anything about myself or my body. So that was my first step towards embodiment and towards a holistic way of being in this world. And I'll love yoga forever for that. And in time, my teaching, so I started to do yoga all the time. I became a yoga teacher. I'm still passionate about yoga to this day. I still teach it to this day. And I think it's so good for so many reasons. And then when I learned about somatic experiencing, I started to learn even more about how our bodies are really here for us. Every stress I have, even the times where I'm disembodied or disconnected from my body, is my body protecting me from something, whether it's real or perceived. So, learning about how the nervous system works, learning about how to regulate my nervous system and reconnect to my body, even during times of stress, has been quite profound. And it's actually increased my capacity for joy because, as somebody has shut down for life, for protection reasons, whether I needed to or not, I was shut down for a large period of my life. Having access to my body and being okay with activation, with charge, with stress, with conflict has actually increased my capacity to be with joy and ease and relaxation. So, yeah, I guess I try to incorporate that into my teachings of yoga as well. And yoga can be really intense and really vigorous if that's what we need. It can also be really sweet, really gentle if we need, and we need both. So we learn what our preferences are in our yoga practice. And then I try to incorporate ways to appreciate the fullness of the practice and to do things slowly in time where you can build your capacity to enjoy more things.
I love how you're talking about building capacity, right? Because many people, I believe, who are stuck in kind of the Western modernity, it's all about streamlining, right? You talked earlier about the linear models. And when it comes to humans, you are the resource. A lot of Western culture about emotions and that it's okay to have quote unquote what they would say negative emotions as well as positive emotions. And so how has that journey been for you in your growth of capacity? Has nature helped as well?
Well, I think you know the answer to that. Absolutely, nature has helped with that. And I completely agree. It's emotions are challenging, and if you grew up in a way where you weren't taught to be with your emotions, or you grew up in an environment where you had an overwhelming experience, so your system learned to shut down with big emotions. I mean, there's so many ways that our bodies protect us from it, and it's also not talked about and not experienced in our culture. So I just, we like to be happy and we don't like to be sad. And I totally get that, and it makes perfect sense. And I've learned that by, as you said, building my capacity to be with that, my zest for life has increased. And it actually doesn't make it easier to live life, but it makes it more.
So I want to kind of talk about, as you're having this conversation, and being able to witness you in your life, you take a lot of, courageous leaps of faith, right? There's people who like kind of build up and stuff like that, but you went from, I need to be heard, so I need to know how to sell my voice in marketing to, wait a minute, environmentalism intellectually, and then leaping into embodiment through nature. And then the next leap that I saw you take as well is really protecting wildlife. And not many people take leaps of faith like that, Diane. I wanna just witness you in your amazing capacity. So when did, just going, when did that leap of faith happen for you when you went from, oh, camping, I get it. I get everything that I've thought about intellectually about the environment. When did then that next nudge be like, I need to follow this more? When did that happen? How did that happen?
Yeah. I mean, I think it happened slowly in time, and there definitely were a few pivotal points. In the first stage, I guess, or the first real experience was my falling in love with nature, with being surrounded by the, by nature, surrounded by the ocean, surrounded by trees, by plants, and really feeling that love and joy, which I hadn't experienced anything like it. Awe is another word. Like there's a lot of awe. If I stand in front of the ocean, I can't help but feel awe. If a freaking dolphin jumps up, I just lose my shit for lack of a better word. And that's a powerful feeling. And it was in my body. And, you know, when I love something, I get protective. That, going back to my creation story, you know, my mother was a protector. So when I love something, I want to protect it. And, you know, I see destruction happening. I see overconsumption happening, and none of this is bad. I went through a judgy period. I'm not going to lie, where I had a hard time being around humans because I was so judgmental of them. But I think I was judging myself because there were things that I knew I could be doing better and I wasn't. And that was really hard for me to face. So I made some changes. And that was really the next layer for me was, you know, wanting to protect it and seeing the ways in which I was participating in the destruction of something I love so dearly and having to be really honest about myself. And yeah, so I changed a lot about my lifestyle. I did choose to go vegan for environmental reasons and then later on animal rights reasons, and I'm still vegan to this day. You know, it was an easy shift. I was like, okay, I did some research, and for me, it seemed like an easy shift. And I did go zero waste for a few years up until the pandemic. I was zero waste. And personal choices, I could never be 100%. Like the way the world is set up right now with globalization of the world, like I'm on a computer right now, right? I've flown to see my family. Like it's really challenging to be 100% non-harming to the environment. So, you know, we all make our choices and land somewhere and it ebbs and flows, and I get that. But what became really, I was going to Point Reyes National Seashore for several years, and I really got to know that particular piece of land. And, you know, it's a national park. It's a national seashore, and it has, you know, federal protections from the United States government for better or for worse. And it wasn't being upheld. And I saw what was going on in that park. They had a plan to kill wild elk, all to benefit commercial ranching properties that were leased within the national seashore. And I had a real problem with it. And I talked around and I met some other people who were also upset about it. And I helped start a campaign to build awareness that this was happening and to change some policy in the park to protect these wild animals who were just trying to live, just like you and I. So yeah, I think for me, it's connecting with what I really love and value and being really honest about what my capacity is in that moment and following my heart and not backing down.
So, this word capacity has come up again, and many people who are or have been on the front lines of social justice work get burnt out. What is a way that we can approach being on a front line or having our voice heard, right? Without having to sell it, that will create, as you said, more capacity to feel all of the things instead of just being on a mission.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it ha really letting it, this sounds almost paradoxical, but not getting caught up with the results.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I attach to a result of what I want, which is so, and I did it. And every time I clung to a result that I wanted, and it didn't happen, it was devastating. And the more I was able to do the work because I believed in it and not to actually make change, I was able to do a better job. And I was able to have a little, it's like I let myself off the hook. I didn't get as, I didn't go on the roller coasters and I didn't, yeah, I think letting myself off the hook and just doing the work to do the work because it needs to be done. And that's really hard. It's really, really hard. And I'm not perfect at it.
Now, let's talk a little bit about awe. I love awe. And how is can awe help transform us, kind of be that push or that moment of transcendence that many people don't think is possible? How can we use awe more in our everyday?
Gosh. Well, for me, it has a lot to do with embodiment. And I think the first moment of awe I had was at the ocean. And the experience of awe is a full body experience. And, I would liken it to a state of nirvana or a state of enlightenment or a state of really knowing that I'm connected to something bigger than myself. And it's not in my head, it's a full body experience. And I actually needed a vast, gorgeous landscape for me to connect to it at first. But
Mm.
once I had that, I I began to look for it more. And as I, of course, got more in my body and have learned to regulate my nervous system a bit more and have learned to be with pain and grief and anger and built my capacity for quote unquote the negative emotions that I shut down from a lot, the more I can be in awe in small, mundane moments. It's actually everywhere. And that sounds cheesy and cliche, but simply being present in my full body is a moment of awe.
Mm.
It's a really powerful experience, and I don't need to go to the ocean, although I love to do that. I can be in my backyard and see. I saw a monarch butterfly fluttering. I planted this rose milkweed in my garden, and I saw a monarch butterfly by it today, and it's just I had a moment of awe. And I see these robins come into my backyard and flutter around and fight over little scraps of stuff, and I just that is an experience of awe. Um, enjoy like actually taking the time to enjoy my morning coffee can sort of remind me of awe, especially if I consider where the coffee came from and how far it's come and how many people and places and all this stuff made this happen for me to have this cup of coffee. Like it's wild. Um, so I don't know. I think if I look for awe and know what it feels like, I can access it in subtler ways where I don't need to go to extremes to find it.
So, how can people, if they don't have the opportunity to have such a large landscape be the change, what are small ways that they can start to have awe or start to walk that path of embodiment if some physical things aren't accessible to them, or they're like, "Ugh, I don't want to go to yoga." It just becomes this thing on a list again. What are ways that people can every day kind of be instead of do?
Gosh, well, I mean, you said it right there. It's just be versus do. And everyone's so different. So I guess I would just start with whatever you enjoy, see if you could lean into whatever activity you like to do. So, and for example, if you in the mornings, I'm going to use coffee again because I think a lot of us drink coffee or tea if you're not a coffee drinker. I get that. I was off coffee for like 9 months, and I'm back on. But whatever your morning beverage, I think that's a common morning ritual that a lot of people enjoy. Savor it. Savor the things that you already enjoy doing. And to me, that's you don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to do anything different. And things that might help savor is notice, like if it's the beverage, like feel it in your hands, feel it in your mouth and the temperature and the texture, and like try to practice. And it might be hard at first, but really practice stretching out those experiences, even if it's for 5 minutes. Stretch out that experience and try to see and notice how your body feels as you're enjoying that thing, whatever it is.
It's almost, like instead of creating muscle memory, right? Creating the memory of awe or the memory of experience, like working that muscle, you know. Um,
Yes.
I like
Oh
that.
my gosh, I love how you said that.
Yeah, I like that. That's a whole thing you could do. um,
Yeah.
so as you move back, right, to Michigan and your journey from California, how is it that you have landed and have been able to connect from, the place that, birthed you in a way? And if I remember correctly, you weren't a very outdoorsy person to kind of coming back, like wild nature. How was that transition for you?
Well, I moved back in the middle of the pandemic, and when the pandemic started, I kind of went a bit overboard with activism. I think I, like so many of us, went into some kind of survival state. I was activated, and I went overboard into activism, and I absolutely have zero regrets. All the work I did was amazing, and it was too much for my system. And my housing became unstable in San Francisco, because I was on the ground doing frontline work, and my roommate at the time wanted isolation, so we agreed to part ways. I didn't realize that the pandemic would be so long. So anyway, I went through about 6 different housing situations in the Bay Area every day doing frontline work. And when I had to renew my sublease, I was like, my sister, who was living in Detroit at the time, invited me to just move in with her. And so I moved home, and I didn't know how it would go. I didn't know I was going to stay. But being at home, being in a place I grew up in, being surrounded by my family, it was medicine I didn't know I needed. And the energy of Detroit at the time versus the energy of the Bay Area at the time was medicine for me. And I met a great partner, and I was around family, and I was like, I just think I need to be home. I didn't have any rhyme or reason, but I listened, and yeah, it's been an amazing journey being home. My life is very different, and I've grown in ways that I couldn't have grown had I stayed in California.
Beautiful. I want to delve into this front line because I know what you're talking about. I don't think people understand when you're talking about during the pandemic how you were on the front lines. And I think it kind of shows a lot about your capacity again, right? What were people's capacity during a pandemic? And yours was to go and help homeless people. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when the pandemic hit, I it became very apparent that, everything started to close down, and there's a pretty large houseless population in the Bay Area. And I just started to, I was like, well, the limited resources they had were gone. Water sources were closed, public bathrooms were closed. And at that point, I had a pretty large network of activists, and I knew how to do community organizing. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to kind of go out there and see what people need and see what I can piece together because I have those skills. So I just put out a couple calls, and I created a mutual aid network where it started just getting meals to people, meals and water. And I had to do bottled water, which was just, as a zero waste person, horrible. But I was like, you know what? It's better than no water. So, yeah, so I started organizing for people who were isolated, who wanted to help. I asked them to cook meals under, specific guidelines, like CDC guidelines, to cook meals, healthy, low waste meals. And then I created a network of people who are comfortable delivering that to certain houseless camps, and each person had a camp. So we would go to the same camps and get to know the population at the houseless community there. We would just start to provide meals on a like home cooked meals on a regular basis, and we got to know the people there and got to see what else they needed. And so, based on what they needed, I would put out calls to the community and just get whatever they needed to them, at a time where a lot of services just shut down. So I had a friend who opened up her garage for me and a couple others to house like donations we would get, like tents and sanitation and masks and this and that. So we had like a donation hub, and then whatever the camps needed, we could deliver it to them. So yeah, and then by had a network of we were out every day at I forget how many camps at this point, but Oakland and San Francisco, I think every day we had deliveries going out. So it was a pretty big thing.
I know. You downplay a lot of what you have done, so that's why I try to bring it to light and to witness you and to celebrate that. One other thing that I want to celebrate is how hands-on you truly are. How does being hands-on kind of change the game or perception than people who, you know, just donate or give from afar or want things to just be tax write-offs? What does the hands-on for you, how has that changed you, right? And you have the capacity for it. Some people don't, so there's no shade on anyone, but you're very a hands-on person. So what does that mean for you?
Yeah, well, for me, it really helps me stay. And I guess this is a shout out to my love of intellectualism, but it helps me keep a critical perspective. And at a time where there's so much sway by social media and fear mongering and news, and it's really hard. Like our media, I sound a little bit off saying this, but the media really can influence how we perceive things, and it can influence our behaviors. And I think being hands on reminds me to think for myself. And it's not the only way to do that, but for me, it was really helpful because I see with my eyes what's going on. And I don't have to depend on the news telling me or social media posts telling me or this or that. Like, I like going and seeing how things are in real life. For me, that's how I learn best. And it also keeps me connected to larger communities and different perspectives. And, I have to truly tolerate people who are different than me, which I've been better at some points than others in my life. So yeah, it helps me feel connected when I'm out there with my own hands.
Beautiful. And you also do things that are not hands-on. And how has that helped also kind of expand your potential of capacity and compassion? Because you definitely have a lot of compassion, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I mean, I think, now I teach yoga solely online, and which is so weird because I am such a hands on person. But, I've really been able to love teaching online. And what I realized too is that, for example, teaching yoga in person, I am influenced by people's energy. And teaching from my home and practicing from home, it's like I don't have these as a direct external influence. So I really have to practice how I want. and I get to teach how I want. And I feel like my offerings are more authentic that way. So I like that. And there's so many people who don't want to leave their house to do yoga. And I'm like, oh, I can connect with all these other people who don't want to go to a studio for lots of reasons. I mean, yoga studios are wonderful and sometimes they're not. So I love teaching online and being a bit more, I would say, in a way that's hands off, but it just opens up other doors. And I get to meet other people and connect with people who, are in different countries and different states and different time zones. And they get to practice in their own space. And that's really cool to me.
Now, we spoke a little bit about kind of how people can do small things. You're really good at breaking things down, and that's why I keep having you, give us some visuals. You talked about awe being present in just your everyday coffee, which is something that I love. It's something that I've always said. But how can people who want to help or want to interact or want to learn more about natural environment or how people operate, how can they do so in their backyard instead of, I find many people saying, oh, well, until I have that experience, I can't really understand. Well, just because you don't understand something doesn't mean you can't have compassion for people or for ways of being. Or if I don't go to this foreign place, I'm not going to understand, right? So I understand that concept, but I don't think it should limit us when it comes to our capacity for compassion. So how can people work with the unknown? Coming kind of full circle back with emotions and stress and not having to completely be in a container, in a yoga studio, or in front of the ocean to understand compassion, majesty, wonder, awe, and hold it in the same hand, right? With fear, right? With all of the other quote unquote negative emotions, being uncomfortable, feeling weird. How can we, in small ways, not have a huge carbon footprint and start connecting to ourselves here and to the communities, whether they're natural communities or just communities of people as well? That was a really long question, but I hope you were able to track that.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I mean, there's no one way to answer that, but the first thing that popped into my mind is to learn about your native plants. And that might sound too simple of an answer, but plants evolved in a place. And that blows my mind. Like wherever you are, listeners sitting, you're in a specific place in the world. And that place has existed for the Earth's entirety. And there's been this huge evolution, including the evolution of your local ecosystem, which probably you don't, it's, when we look outside, I live in the suburbs, there's a lot of lawns. And lawns are great. You can put a blanket down and have a picnic, and they're super fun, and people take a lot of pride in mowing their lawns, and I get that. But what are your native plants? What would if all the houses and the lawns were taken away? What local plants were there before whatever neighborhood you were in? Learn about your local plants and plant a local plant. Go, do a little Google search. Where's a native plant nursery near you? Go to it. Talk to the people who run the native plant nursery and maybe buy a native plant and plant one in your yard and see what happens. Because what's really cool is that they're going to attract native insects and native animals, and you get to be, it's, on the large scale, sure, it's not much, but on that individual, like on that very zoomed in scale, that's huge. So I would start there. What are your native plants? Ooh, and what's your watershed? So that's another cool question. Just like learning about where you live. Like, what's your watershed? So I would start there.
I think that's great. I love it. I love that answer. Those are things that I live every day, knowing where my watershed is. And I'm always fighting or not fighting, I'm always in deep discussion with the non-native plants here in Hawaii that we live here to be like, are you taking too many resources, my friend? Who planted you here? And why are you struggling? Okay. So I love all of these answers. Any more words of wisdom that you have for us at this time, Diana?
Um, I mean, I don't know. I just think one thing I always try to come back to is this concept, which I learned in somatic experiencing, which is titration. Just doing things in a small amount and really honoring your own, I'll use the word capacity again, honoring your own capacity. You do not have to do anything grand. Just take it in small, small pieces and enjoy doing it. And when you need a break, take a break. Um, change, it can happen fast, but usually the lasting change is small amounts over time.
Beautiful. I love it. Don't do things. No, don't be grand, but keep it in the land. Your body,
Oh,
your land, and stuff like. There's a T-shirt. There you go. Well, thank you, Diana. Can you tell us where people can find you and follow you and take your amazing yoga classes?
yeah. So I teach online. My website is dianamay.com, MAY. That's my middle name. You can find me on Instagram, Diana May Yoga. I share tips on yoga and somatic experiencing and occasionally my love of nature. And yeah, I hope to see you all in class.
Maybe you can do a native plant yoga class.
Gosh, that's a dream.
Well, my friend, it's good to have you in the circle, and I can't wait to see you in person at some point soon. And thank you for joining us, even though you thought we were just catching up over a phone call.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Once again, it is with deepest gratitude that I bow to you for joining me on this podcast, this episode, this circle, this plática, this meditation, this remembering. I hope that you have stayed curious. I hope to see you in the circle again next week. So make sure that you like or follow. Until then, may you be blessed with abundance of peace and radical self-love.